All right, so today we're going to dive deep into something I think we're all interested in, and that's how to build a truly successful romantic relationship.
Oh, yeah.
We've got some really interesting source material that we're going to be going over today,
Okay.
and it basically breaks down 4 key elements,
Right.
which are trust, respect, communication, and emotional intimacy.
Ah,
And what I think is so interesting is the source material really emphasizes that these aren't just like nice to haves.
right.
These are the bedrock
Yeah.
of any lasting love.
The
And
essentials.
yeah, the absolute essentials.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is that they use all these real life examples,
Oh, cool.
which I think will make it a lot more helpful and a lot more relatable for everybody listening.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, me too.
Why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about how the source material talks about trust?
Okay, well, the way this source approaches trust is really interesting because it goes beyond that surface level.
Oh, okay.
It's not just about, like, not cheating.
Right.
It's really about having this deep sense of security
Mm.
and confidence in your partner and in the relationship.
Right. Like you can trust someone to not cheat on you, but not necessarily trust them with like your deepest fears and insecurities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And the source actually uses the story of John and Sarah to illustrate that.
Oh, tell me about John and Sarah.
So John had been cheated on in a past relationship.
Okay. Makes sense.
And so, understandably, he brought some trust issues into his relationship with Sarah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so he was constantly checking her phone, questioning her about where she'd been,
Oh, wow.
almost trying to, like, control the situation.
It's almost like he was trying to prevent himself from getting hurt again.
Right, exactly. And the source points out that that type of behavior actually stems from insecurity, not genuine care.
That's interesting.
It's like he was projecting his past hurt onto Sarah instead of actually, trying to build trust organically.
That's so insightful.
And they quote John's therapist, who says, and this is a great quote,
Okay.
"Trust is built through consistent actions, not constant suspicions."
Ooh, I like that a lot.
Right.
So it's not about demanding trust, which is kind of what it sounds like John was doing.
Yeah,
It's about actually, behaving in a trustworthy way.
exactly.
Showing that you're reliable, being transparent, allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
Right, being vulnerable so that the other person can also feel safe to be vulnerable.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It makes you think about, what are some ways that you've built trust in your own relationships?
Yeah.
Have you had any experiences like that where maybe you started off with a little bit less trust and then had to build it up?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think everyone has to do that to
Yeah.
some extent. No one comes into a relationship with like a perfect blank slate.
Yeah, that's true.
And, I think it's also important to remember that trust is a two-way street.
For sure.
Both partners need to be actively participating in building and maintaining it.
Totally. And, this actually connects really well to the next element that the source dives into, which is respect.
Oh, okay.
And I think a lot of times we kind of lump trust and respect together, but the source makes this really clear distinction between the two.
Absolutely, they do. And they use this example of a couple, Tom and Laura,
Okay.
to illustrate that point. And Tom and Laura are married, but their dynamic starts to become kind of complicated.
How so?
Well, Laura, with the best of intentions, starts to take charge of a lot of aspects of Tom's life.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like she starts trying to help him manage his time,
Okay.
pick his hobbies, like things like that.
I can see how that could be a little tricky.
Yeah,
Like on the surface, it seems like, oh, she's just trying to be supportive.
exactly.
Since-
Yeah, she has good intentions.
Right.
But what the source is highlighting is that even though Laura's intentions might be good,
Yeah.
this behavior is actually disrespectful of Tom's individuality and autonomy.
Because he's not getting to make his own choices.
Right?
Exactly.
She's not giving him the space to make his own choices,
Yeah.
to learn from his own mistakes,
Yeah.
to be his own person,
Right.
and to grow.
That's such a good point. Like, I think a lot of people might miss that nuance.
Right. It can be very subtle.
Yeah, it's easy to be like, oh, well, she's just trying to help.
Exactly.
But really, there's this deeper level of like, respecting that other person as an individual, even if the choices are different from yours.
Yeah, and the source even takes it a step further.
Oh, okay.
They say that respect also involves supporting your partner's growth. So it's about encouraging them to pursue their own passions,
Okay.
learn new things,
Yeah.
Evolve as individuals.
So it's not just about accepting them as they are right now. It's about actually supporting them on their journey.
Exactly. And recognizing that, if one partner is stagnant, ultimately that's going to impact the relationship as a whole.
Wow. That's really powerful.
It's a really important point.
So, like, how do we find that balance between offering support,
Yeah.
but also giving them the space to grow in their own way?
It's a delicate dance, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it definitely takes practice and a good amount of communication.
Well, speaking of communication, that's the next element, isn't it?
It is, yeah. The next one the source dives into.
Perfect.
And I think, we hear all the time that communication is key.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But this source really gives us a fresh perspective
Okay.
on what that actually means in practice.
Yeah.
And how do we actually do that?
How do we actually communicate?
Yeah. And they use this story of Lisa and Mark
Okay.
to highlight how these communication patterns in a relationship can kind of shift over time,
Gotcha.
and often not for the better.
Yeah, I can imagine that happening.
Right. So Lisa and Mark, they started out super communicatives,
Yeah.
sharing everything. But as time went on, Mark kind of became more withdrawn,
Oh.
and Lisa kind of fell into this trap of expecting him to be a mind reader,
Yeah.
which I think we all do
We all do that.
at some point.
Yeah.
It-
And it never works out well.
It never works out well, does it?
No, never.
But it's so common.
Yeah.
And the source points out that this dynamic is incredibly common.
Yeah.
We just kind of assume that our partner should just know
Yeah.
what we're thinking or feeling.
Right. And it's like, how could they possibly know that unless we tell them?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that obviously leads to misunderstandings, resentment,
Yeah.
and just a lot of frustration.
Oh, yeah. Tons of frustration.
So much unnecessary frustration.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like we forget our partners aren't, telepathic.
Right, yeah.
We actually have to articulate our thoughts and feelings.
Exactly.
If we want them to know what's going on.
And on the flip side, we also have to be good listeners.
Right.
Communication is not just about expressing ourselves.
Yeah.
It's about really hearing and understanding our partner's perspective.
And that takes effort.
It does.
It's active listening.
It is. And the source actually suggests that we set aside dedicated time
Oh, wow.
for communication,
Interesting.
like free from distractions,
Oh, I like that.
where both partners can,
Yeah.
really share their thoughts and feelings openly and respectfully.
That's such a good idea. Like, how often are we having these, like, big, important conversations
Right.
while also, like, doing the dishes and scrolling through Instagram?
Yeah, multitasking. And then we wonder why we don't feel heard.
Totally. Yeah. Like, I'm curious, do you have any strategies on good communication that have been helpful for you in your own relationships?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's been super helpful for me is using I statements
Oh, yeah. Those are good.
instead of like blaming or accusing my partner.
Oh, that's a good tip.
So instead of saying, you never listen to me,
Right.
I might say, I feel unheard when I share my feelings about this.
Oh, that's much better.
It shifts the focus to my own experience,
Right.
and it kind of opens the door for a more productive conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't put the other person on the defensive immediately,
Right.
which is so easy to do.
It is.
And it's so interesting how that kind of ties back into that whole taking ownership of your own emotions, right?
That's
Like
right.
not expecting your partner to fix them,
Yeah.
which actually leads us perfectly into the final element that the source explores, which is emotional intimacy.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one.
It is a big word.
And I think the source does a really great job of distinguishing between emotional intimacy and physical intimacy,
Okay.
because you can have one without the other.
That's so true.
They actually use the example of Emily and James.
Okay.
And on the surface, they seem like they have this loving relationship.
Right.
They're affectionate.
Uh-huh.
They enjoy spending time together.
Okay.
But there's this lack of depth, the
Mhm.
sense of emotional distance between them.
Like they're not really connecting on that deeper level.
Right. And the source suggests that this distance comes from a fear of vulnerability.
Oh, that makes sense.
Both Emily and James are holding back.
Yeah.
They're afraid to fully open up to each
They're
other.
afraid to be hurt.
Yeah, afraid to be hurt, afraid of rejection.
Right.
They're protecting their hearts.
But that ends up preventing them from truly connecting.
Exactly. It's like building walls around your heart.
Yeah.
Might feel safe in the short term,
Uh-huh.
but ultimately just creates this barrier to real intimacy.
So true. So then how do we overcome that fear of vulnerability?
Right. That's the big question.
Yeah. Does the source have any advice on that?
They do.
Okay.
They suggest starting small.
Okay.
So instead of trying to have these big, deep emotional conversations right away,
Right.
try sharing something small but meaningful
Mm-hmm.
with your partner,
Okay.
like maybe a worry that's been on your mind or a hope you've been holding on to,
I like that.
and pay attention to how your partner responds.
Yeah. Like, are they listening?
Exactly. Do they listen with empathy?
Mm.
Do they offer support?
So it's like testing the waters a little bit.
It is, yeah.
And then based on their response, you can kind of gauge how safe it feels.
Exactly. And you can kind of build that trust and that safety gradually,
Yeah,
layer by layer,
I love that.
until you feel more comfortable sharing more deeply.
It's all about feeling safe.
It is.
Which makes me think, isn't emotional intimacy ultimately about feeling seen and understood
Absolutely.
by your partner?
Yeah, it's about knowing that you can be your true, authentic self with them
Yeah.
without judgment or fear of rejection.
And that takes time.
It
So it
does.
is for
It takes consistent effort and attention.
Yeah, it's not just like a one-time thing.
It's not a box you can check off.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process.
It's a journey.
It is.
It really is. So, okay, we've covered these 4 cornerstones of a thriving relationship.
Yeah.
Trust, respect, communication, and emotional intimacy.
The big 4.
The big 4. And it's so interesting how they're all connected.
Yeah, you got
It's not enough to just have one or
You
two.
need all of them
You need all of them to really create that strong foundation.
to build that solid foundation
Yeah.
for lasting love.
For lasting love. And the source actually uses a really nice quote from Maya Angelou to tie all this together.
Oh, I love my Angelou.
Me too.
It's the quote.
So she says, love recognizes no barriers. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, penetrates walls to arrive at its destination full of hope.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't that a great quote?
It is. It's so hopeful.
And it really highlights how, love when it's nurtured with these essential elements
Yeah,
can overcome just incredible challenges.
it can. It really can.
But I'm also curious, does the source ever talk about the flip side of that?
What do you mean?
Like, are there ever situations where despite our best efforts, love isn't enough?
That's a really good question.
Like, what if we do all the things?
Yeah.
We build the trust, the respects, the communication, we have all the emotional intimacy in the world,
Right.
but the relationship still doesn't work out.
It's a tough one. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, yeah, sometimes relationships do end,
Yeah.
even when both partners have put in the work.
That's hard.
It's a difficult reality,
Yeah.
but one that the source doesn't shy away from.
Okay.
And, they're basically saying that while these 4 elements are crucial
Yeah.
for a thriving relationship, they don't guarantee a happily ever after.
Yeah. It would be nice if it were that simple.
It would be, but unfortunately it's not.
No.
And they point out that sometimes, individual growth
Uh-huh.
takes partners in different directions.
Yeah.
Or sometimes unforeseen circumstances create just insurmountable challenges.
Right. Life happens.
Life happens, exactly.
Yeah.
And it throws us curveballs
Yeah.
that we can't always anticipate.
That's so true. It makes me think about how complex relationships really are and how much they're constantly evolving,
Yeah,
just like we are as individuals.
absolutely.
And, while these core elements that we've been talking about are essential for nurturing love, they don't erase the possibility of heartbreak
Yeah, unfortunately not.
or the need to, sometimes make difficult decisions.
Absolutely.
But I think maybe having this knowledge equips us to make those decisions
Yeah.
with more awareness and compassion.
And understanding of
Yeah.
ourselves and our partners.
Exactly.
I think you're right.
Yeah. It's interesting how this whole deep dive into romantic love
Yeah.
is making me think about relationships in general.
Yeah.
The source mainly focused on romantic partnerships,
Right.
but I can't help but think about how these principles apply to all kinds of relationships in our lives.
That's interesting.
Do you think these same elements of trust, respect, communication, and emotional intimacy are just as important in our friendships,
Yeah.
our family relationships,
Yeah.
even our work connections?
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the source doesn't explicitly go into detail about other types of relationships.
Right.
But I think those core elements that we talked about,
Yeah.
they definitely seem applicable.
Yeah.
Like, think about your closest friends.
Okay.
I mean, don't you need to trust and respect them
Oh, yeah.
to really feel comfortable confiding in them?
Absolutely.
And how can any friendship really thrive without open communication
Right.
and, a sense of emotional connection?
It's so true. It's like those same building blocks are creating that sense of safety and support,
Exactly.
whether it's with a partner or a friend.
And, even in the workplace, these principles are so vital
Oh, yeah, for sure.
for a healthy and productive environment.
Totally. Like when your colleagues trust and respect each other, they're more likely to collaborate
Yes.
and communicate and support each other.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's such a good point. It's like
Yeah.
we compartmentalize these concepts too much,
I think so.
thinking about them as like, oh, this is just for romantic love.
Right.
But really, they're fundamental
Yeah.
to any meaningful connection. It's so interesting. So it's almost like this deep dive into romantic love
Yeah.
has given us this blueprint for building stronger bonds in every area of our
You'll
lives.
love that. Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you, and I'm feeling really inspired
That's
to
it.
kind of be more intentional about
Yeah.
applying these principles in my own relationships.
Absolutely.
It's been such a thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today.
Of course, my pleasure.
And I just want to say, even though love can be messy and complicated
It can.
and challenging at times,
Yeah.
it's always worth the effort.
Always.
It really is. And I think that's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
So just to recap for everyone,
Okay.
today we explored those 4 crucial elements of building lasting love.
Right.
Trust, respect, communication, and emotional intimacy.
The foundation.
Yeah, the foundation. And we learned how those elements aren't just nice to haves.
Right.
They're absolute essentials for any thriving relationship.
Absolutely. When we talked about how even though, relationships are complex
Yeah, for sure.
and they're always evolving,
They are.
and sometimes things don't work out the way we hope.
Unfortunately, that is true.
Yeah. But even when that happens,
Yeah.
having a deeper understanding of these core principles can really help us
Yeah.
to navigate those challenges with more grace.
Totally. And, maybe make those difficult decisions
Yeah.
with more awareness and compassion.
Absolutely.
So I think the big takeaway here is that
Yeah.
this deep dive into romantic love has really given us a blueprint
I like
for building stronger bonds in every area of our lives.
It has.
And I think that's pretty awesome.
It is.
So thank you so much for joining us today on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Likewise.
And to all our listeners out there, remember, even though love can be messy
Yeah, it can be.
and complicated and challenging,
For sure.
it's always, always worth the effort.
Absolutely.
So keep showing up, keep learning, keep growing, and keep loving.
Beautifully said.
Thanks for listening.